Again, thank you very much for joining, gentlemen, and really cover a few items such as pre-COVID, post-COVID, and then throughout where we are at the moment. If I would have met you in 2019, what was your outlook from a tourism perspective for 2020?
We started 2020 actually on a very strong footing. The arrivals were again through the roof. We weren't worried about basically volume. Our key markets of growth coming out of Asia, the fundamentals were there. It's not just China, Indonesia, India, and we've got huge emerging markets coming out of Cambodia, Laos, and Myanmar. All this were middle class coming out of the country for the first time. We did a very quick analysis, I thought, towards the last quarter of 19, where the level of passport penetration of Indonesia was in the low double digits. So it was like 12 or 15% thereabouts. We were looking at huge travel potential and what we were, I thought the challenge at that point in time was the issue of, given the limited capacity and resources that we have, how do we then make the best use of this to attract higher yield customers? So that it was really an issue of optimizing the resources that we have on ground to maximize the yield. That has always been our priority for the past 6 to 7 years, but that basically is out of the window. COVID-19 now has basically changed the entire travel landscape over the top of our head. We are now in survival mode. I think we are trying to keep most of our industry members alive. Basically, the whole issue here is which destination has most of its companies intact and reformed by the time travel can come around. The difference between 2019 and the prognosis between end 2019 and 2020 now, which is like we are just 4 months into the year, is totally different.
What about you, Sunit? Because you're on the receiving end as looking after hotels. You would have written budgets sometime during 2019 for 2020. Was there a very optimistic view on 2020? Was it kind of like a transitioning year, or did you really think, you know what, next year we can actually go to new heights?
I think 2020, because we have bigger portion of our portfolio in Singapore, and 2020 is supposed to be so-called the convention year for Singapore, the air show and all these things were happening. So there was a natural upside to the budget compared to 2019 performance. Plus, the other bigger portfolio representation for us in Australia. And Australia was, as everybody knows, was seeing no slowdown. The convention calendar was packed in Melbourne, where we have 2 properties. Sydney was doing some good numbers, the overall production. So based on just these 2 portfolios, as alluded, apart from China, Vietnam, and other related geographies seeing stable, if not aggressive growth, our budgets were a little bit more than just optimistic. And rightfully said, we started Q1 by hitting the ball way out of the court. Our forecast up to 20th of January, we were sitting and looking at the forecast for Q1, and they were, decently positive. And then 4 days later, it was a 360 turn, and here we are.
Did you already know in January that you say, oh my God, something dramatic is going to happen? Or were you still on the kind of cautious side and say, we'll ride through it?
I think the timing in and around Chinese New Year, we knew exactly what our exposure to China market was, right? Because it is the biggest travel period for outbound China travel, even within China travel-wise. So we knew exactly what commitments we have in terms of our businesses sitting in our hotels in the regions that I mentioned, primarily within our properties in China, in and around Asia Pacific region, primarily, and with a focus to Singapore. We knew what was the exposure. So the moment the first wave of requests for cancellations started to come in, we did quantify for China and Singapore, so to speak. So this is now gone to end of January. But by 1st of February, we had very good idea that it's going to hit us big, at least in Singapore, Malaysia, and China. We did look at a very staggered approach to forecasting for the 4 quarters to say, okay, because at that time, any point of reference was a SARS reference. So everybody was saying if 3.5 month is the incubation to recovery kind of period, then should we look at staggered? At that time, we were looking at washing down our forecast projections into Q2, Q3, Q4, and a bigger aggressive look at the remaining part of Q1. So yes, we did do that for the 3 countries that we mentioned. Australia, at that time, we were not so sure it would get impacted until Europe came into the picture.
What about you, Chichuan? At what time did you say, now I got to take out the big guns?
Well, we had experience from SARS, and basically, I think if you will recall, SARS came quick, killed a lot. The mortality rate was much higher. But however, it came with symptoms. So, but SARS disappeared relatively quickly as well. And after that, what happened was, because it disappeared so fast, the market came back really quickly. But we were prepared for a washout for a limited period of time. We had models that ranged from 3 to 6 months. We did model something along 9 months, but that was a very distant possibility. We knew that because actually H1N1 wasn't that bad, but when SARS came about, because of its high mortality rate, it was literally, we were hollowed out. So we expected that in the short term, from January plus 3 months, the decline would be really rapid. By February, we knew that this wasn't going to go away that fast. The fallout was much faster, and by the time it hit Europe and US, and also given what we were seeing in how government were planning to, because the whole function here now is because of its high transmissibility and low mortality rate, and basically once you're warded, you're going to be warded for a really long time. The problem now is really the function is really an issue of the capacity that you have in healthcare versus how fast you open up. So now we are looking at a model where literally while waiting for a vaccine to come about, it's going to be a start-stop model where you will open up, and I'm just talking about opening up social activities and not even the borders per se. Borders is a whole new different ballgame altogether. We're just going to open up socially, and then when before herd immunity is and herd immunity is anything north of 60% population, depending on where you read from, that it gets infected and basically builds up immunity. You will probably have to start and stop that process. So this is really going to be a long drawn fight.
I remember us talking a few weeks ago. You told me your story about the financial crisis, right? How did you go through that?
Cash is king, and if you don't have it, you need to borrow it. But is that a wise strategy for an SME? Maybe not. If you're an SME, at least a year. At the moment, it is all about cost cutting. It is all about the bottom line. For an SME. So it is probably hibernating, bunkering down, and live to fight another day. That's probably the mentality for some SMEs at the moment. You can try and be optimistic about it, but I think it's still evolving at the moment. And, even for ourselves, I try and pay close attention to the news and look at forecasts just to get a better understanding. But at least a year of cash.
Now, at what point, Andrew, do you think we will start then the re-employing of resources?
Best case guess, I would say probably not until the end of this year. Will we sort of see some scale in companies rescaling their organizations? Because I think everyone is still scrambling at the moment. Everyone is still trying to get the right headcount for their organizations just to get through this period. So we're probably going to see more retrenchments and furloughs to come before a recalibration of headcounts is my best take. And a lot of that is going to be, and I say guesswork because a lot of that is going to be dependent on so many different factors. If all of a sudden tomorrow COVID went away, then hey, whole new ballgame. Remembering SARS somehow just went away, right? I don't know. But, if we keep the current track and there is no vaccine and COVID is still around, it is going to be stop-start because you're going to open up your borders and you're going to get second waves, you're going to get third waves until you sort of do get the herd immunity, if that exists. So it is going to be somewhat of a stop-start. But then again, it is a little bit of guesswork because if miraculously it goes away, then hey, whole new ball game. I think everyone's going to want to start chasing dollars again, and we could see mass recruitment.
Chicho, let me ask you that from an STB perspective. What do businesses in Singapore can ask for or look for when they need help to ride them through that time?
Well, I think, as what Andrew has shared, Singapore has basically, we came out with 3 tranches of fiscal budget measures over 1 quarter this year. I've never seen that before in my entire career. We have not even come out with, we have not even given out what is the first tranche when the second and third one came consecutively. So I think given that there is always friction between announcement to reality, there will be some trickling down effect. So hopefully that will help give a longer cushion period. But I think what Andrew is sharing is certainly a very pragmatic view of where we think the industry is going to go. The good thing is that we are seeing how we are repurposing and deploying tourism resources to do many different things. I think you have read that returning Singaporeans are now being housed in hotels for 14 days. I think this exhibition halls are converted into quarantine facilities. We are deploying out, I think 50 over tour guides to be safe distancing measures, to be safe distancing ambassadors. Singapore Airline, their stewardess and stewards are now helping out at hospitals. So there's a lot of repurposing and basically tourism resources that are being channeled to effective users. So they are not furloughing, in a sense, they are not idling there and all that. So we are trying our best. And I think this certain level of resilience is also something that I see very positive in, because if we can make lemonade when the world throws us lemons, I think we will certainly be in a much better place when things turn around. But I would like to caution that turnaround is not going to be back to where we left off at 2020. It's going to be a new datum altogether. Just as how we left 911 and the entire travel landscape basically adopted to new security measures, this will bring about a new norm. But I think the new norm is something that we are now trying to, I think all of us have a part to play. Technology, declaration of health, it just opens up a whole new dimension and paradigm of where we see travel. But I think the good thing is that no one is sick of the world yet. I think if you have been trapped in the house for the past 6 weeks or so, we just want to go out. I think basically we got to know that actually the world is a much better place out there. But how do we do it responsibly? I think these are things that the new issues, and they are not new issues. They are just issues that in the past we have not been paying much attention to. And now, basically, given this window of opportunity, we can look at things, sustainability, how do we do things better, responsibly. I think these are all new issues that we really have a good reset to look forward to. I'm thinking that it's going to be really a very interesting dynamic that's going to come out. That in the past, I think one of the things that we can think about is that insurance will definitely be playing a very, very important role. Because looking at now, if you were to travel, you put yourself in a plane, and I don't think I don't think everyone is going to migrate to private jets anytime soon. So definitely commercial carriers will still come into play. Maybe not at the same level of intensity, the seating capacity. I mean, we have got news coming out from Delta and all that. Their American carriers are exploring. Do we then take the middle seat away, increasing the ticket prices and all that? So there are some room to play on that front. But you're still looking at hundreds of people squeezing into a very small tin can. Therefore, the risk is very high, because once you have one person that's infected in that little space, cleaning would have to be done, contact tracing has to be done, and I think there's no other way out than to pool risk together. And so insurance becomes a big component. The underwriters we have not heard from them yet, so therefore any report coming out from Alliance and all that will be interesting to hear how the big underwriters are looking at this piece, because there will be profiling. I mean, actuarial science always profile people, and therefore, does it then mean that people with higher risk and therefore attract a very high premium? Would that be again a big factor in swaying who gets to travel, who don't, right? That becomes a very interesting play, because commercial does make a lot of sense. If a young man were to travel, frankly speaking, the likelihood of him surviving, or a young woman surviving this entire let's say COVID is very high. So, but versus someone else who may put himself in a much risk, prior health records will come into play. So it really shakes up a lot of things. Developed countries, they have got established health records in place. Those are the ones that are able to then play this game a whole lot better, because you have data in place. Developing nations, where your health system, your health records are not so established, how do you then get into play? So the very notion that growth is going to be driven by a growing middle class coming out from the developing nations, that itself is one assumption that we will really have to look at, where the growth is going to come, right? So again, this whole recovery, we really have a lot of balls in the air, and we just have to monitor it as we go along. But certainly the new norm will not be the same, as I always say.
How does the future of work, especially in hospitality, look like? And that's a question to all three of you, because you just said somebody in an airline can now become and help, let's say, in hospitals, right? Does that mean we're now creating an industry where you're essentially not niched into a hotel, into an airline or something, but you can go through the motions in an economy that becomes more and more virtual? Have we now created a virtual economy for ourselves, where we say, when it all comes back, do I really need the 100% of workers that I had before?
Yeah, look, I think that's very true. And I think this whole work from home and even multitasking, we were in a way headed that way anyway. I know in previous productivity reports that we looked at, particularly from Asia, and they were looking at other parts of the world like Australia and the UK and so forth. If we're looking at hotels and hospitality, they were already multitasking in a lot of those countries, whereas we weren't really in Singapore as yet. So I think multitasking is going to be important moving forwards for a lot of employees and for a lot of organizations. The work from home, look, it's not going to be for everybody. It's not going to be for every job, because you're still going to be, particularly in customer service, you're still going to need to physically be there. But yeah, absolutely, certain roles, there's going to be a degree of an increase from work from home. But then again, after this, working from home, there may also be a lot of people that's figured out that, work from home isn't for me. Get me back into an office. So I think we're still in this figuring out period at the moment. But the shift, I think the shift will happen. I don't think it's going to be as dramatic as everyone paints it to be. Because, look, I don't think the model was broken per se. It probably needed some tweaks, some improvement, but I don't think the working model was broken. So I don't think it's going to be a dramatic shift per se. I could be wrong. If this drags on for longer, maybe. But I think ultimately it's probably going to be a tweak here and there, and some remodeling.
So if we now look a little bit at how does a recovery, what do you see or what do you plan out on how we think we're going to see the recovery planning out from a pure demand perspective and people coming back to do will it be leisure driven or B, business driven?
What makes it hard is there is no point of reference in this scenario. We thought H1N1, SARS, swine flu, Spanish flu, all these things were point of reference, but there is nothing. So we are starting fresh. It's like a new house in the middle of nowhere. So we don't know. But if we have to benchmark with what is China coming out, right, for the last 2 weeks of transactions that are happening and where that travel bookings are going to, yes, leisure and the countries with internal domestic travel demand will recover fast. So China, Australia, safe. Singapore, Malaysia, not so safe. Whenever US open, whenever Europe open, they will see that recovery, right? So the word that you use, there will be a bit of revenge travel, right? Good thing is we are in an age of data, and data is very easy to collate and represent. So there's a lot of data coming out of STR. There's a lot of data coming out of big OTA partners. Even some of the channel managers. So everybody is saying that leisure is going to come first, and there are destinations. Even Singapore, people are saying we are willing to come because Singapore as a brand is very good in assuring people that you are going to travel to a safe destination when the destination opens. So there is a confidence that happens. So that will be the critical factor. So if everything, the SG clean goes out and we get all the certification for different industry partners, the whole ecosystem that supports the travel and tourism industry in Singapore, the Singapore will recover. So if I have to put in chronological order for us to see the recovery, I think China is already opening up. So now that the National Congress has been announced on the week of 21st of May, I think that is a green flag to say, yes, as a country, we are good to come. Hopefully that sustains. And then Australia, I think they have done some good work in containing, because they were the last to hit, they had a lot of things that they could learn from the countries that were already facing it. We have seen reports coming from South Australia, West Australia, Gold Coast, that the relaxations in conditions are there. New South Wales, Victoria start to happen. And then the moment Australia opens, some of the national carriers start going, even if Singapore as a destination doesn't open, outbound travel starts. And, to me, it is like a new hotel opening, but there will be thousands of hotels opening in the same city, right? So this has, paralyzed so much in so many industries, which was not the case with SARS. SARS did not paralyze to the level. So, it will be a explosion, implosion, both at the same time. And I think cautious recovery until Q4, but after that we could see almost a V-shaped curve. So when in the early stages, after we passed the SARS predictions, my guess was Easter next year. So I'm still hopeful that Easter next year will look rosy, and Q4 will have good travel.
What about you, Sunit? What does it mean also for your assets? Do you think there will be a knock-on effect to real estate? Because some people over the last week were saying, do we really still want something like a sharing economy where we all sit and just collaborate in an open environment?
The way I look at it, right? So in the hospitality industry, the biggest workforce, which is the frontline service staff, whether it is in food and beverage, front office, or housekeeping teams, right? In a typical hotel, the workforce has three components. There are permanent team members. There's always an element of outsourced or casual team members that are currently existing. And there is ad hoc part-time members. So multi-purposing is actually happening, but maybe it was not so intense. So from a cost efficiency purposes, in the low demand period, the number of casuals or number of part-time associates that were being, hired by the hotels were reduced, because then these permanent team members were able to foot some of the workload and take the economy. So that kind of factor or usage of resources was already there from the teams and the associates. But yes, it will become a little bit more pronounced now that, can we run in a better efficiency? You know, the staff to room ratio and all the good statistics that we work with. So certainly there will be a calibration. But hospitality industry is widely a very generalized skill set industry, until unless you're looking at very specialized skill set in the kitchens or in a financial team members, which will continue to happen. But if the business processes on how a payment gets processed, how the banks can transfer funds when it comes to vendor payment, they don't need a big bag of papers to be signed and everything goes into a virtual world. That will already have impact on the hours that are spent, which will have an impact of number of people that you recruit. So that's how we see. But ultimately, we are a people industry. Yes, certain elements of social distancing. There will be a debate which is ongoing even before COVID-19. Is the check-in kiosk something that a luxury hotel versus a more efficient bed and breakfast type hotel can provide? So those debates will remain. And I guess new ways of engagement will remain. So whether it is a low touch, high contact, less connect, whatever that final word will evolve, but it will remain a people industry because that is what it is an emotional link to service. And I don't think it will have that big an impact, but yes, some processes will get refined. Some efficiencies will have an indirect impact of number of people that effectively work in a hotel at any time.
And considering we're in a survival mode kind of area, or in a prolonged area of uncertainty, is there still space for innovation?
I think this gives us a really good window to amplify some of the things that we have already been talking about. And I think a lot of tourism companies that have been doing well, we have a phenomenal run. We had about 6 to 7 years of record growth, right? So I'm sure while good companies would have stashed away some and basically use that reserves to see how long they can drag this out with. And in the meantime, what do they do? And I think basically this is really a time for us to accelerate some of the things that have always been in the backlog, but because of good times, because the cash flow was coming in, the tails were ringing, some things can wait. I think this is the time where we say, look, let's take a cold hard look. What are those things that we really would have wanted to do, and bring them out into the forefront? Job redesign, changing of processes. I've been reading reports from Marriott and Hilton and Four Seasons. They are already advocating the look. They're going to take a cold hard look at how the entire check-in process can be contactless, but yet delivering that level of affinity and service standards. Gyms, buffet lines, how are they going to redesign where you do not need to pile in a lot of people, because it was all randomized. If you walk into a gym, your machine is occupied, you walk away. How do you then schedule those things? How do you then give your members that preferential slot? And because I'm staying in a chain hotel, for example, I know that I will usually go to gym at a certain hour. How can that be already deliberately manifested into my itinerary and that booking be done? So contactless doesn't mean that it has to be very sterile and very cheap. It can be customized and can be done in such a way that if I'm loyal to that chain, I get preference. And this is an opportunity for you to say, look, don't hotel hop. Stay with us because your preferences are locked in, because in this new environment, you will be given the green lane. You will have things that are scheduled way ahead of time. We have looked at in the past using IoT. How do you then make sure that your room is configured in a way that you like? If you are allergic to a certain kind of say smoke or certain elements, how can that level be brought down low? Premium rooms that has that ability to maintain that kind of cleanliness will be able to command a certain rate. The need for third-party auditing, the need for such technologies to be made available and transparent, smart buildings where you know that, look, that where there are a lot of people at the lift lobby, how do I schedule my day? Things like that. So basically, building automation projects that have been basically pushed off way too long are things that we can push up front. And I think basically arising from innovation, I think one of the things that we really do have to think about is basically business models. Business models will change. I think in the good days, we are always looking at taking a very scarce resource that is basically economics 101. And then how do you then basically amortize it in such a way that you can have as many people consuming it and you monetize that? That has always been that business model. But now when you add in the element of health risk, um, the conventional things like concerts, live performances, sports events, you do have to think about. I mean, look at all the major sports leagues. They're now looking at how do you then play sports in front of zero audience and monetize it through your TV channels, through digital means, and all that stuff. It's really a chance where innovation will definitely play a big role. And I think that this is really an investment that is really necessary to be made if you want to be able to start the next phase on a really strong footing. And companies that can afford to do so should do so, because when the travel comes back, when we start things in a new foot, companies that have basically reprioritized and shifted will definitely find themselves running much faster than the rest.
So how does it look then for you, Sunit, in that current environment? How important is the conversation about innovation on a daily or on a strategic level at your level? And equally, is it condensed to certain areas in the business?
I think the discussions are certainly on, right? So with all the news that is going out as to what will be an alternate way of doing it, things post COVID-19. So those discussions are going to start. Innovation, of course, for us, the first move of innovation has to be in the guest service areas, because that is the play field for us, instead of something in a back office automation, which may depend on a vendor to be available or a process to change is something different. So that discussion is very basic at this stage. Yes, I agree that it has to sit in a strategic level, and we see that happening. So we will have that starting from top-down approach, or a more collaborative approach from hotels in the fields to the corporate teams or regional teams driving those discussions to take it forward. But we are not isolating, or at this moment saying that, okay, we will take this. At this moment, the stage is, let's get any possible ideas from every possible person who has a great idea, including knowledge based on the learnings, the grants, the information, the news that is coming out. Put it out on the table, and then probably a roadmap to innovation. So that is how it is looking. It is, we are in 90 days into this thing. So at least it will take another couple of weeks for it to reach a more mature stage of discussion.
Being in recruitment, having been in recruitment for a long time, did your phones all of a sudden run off the hooks to say, hey, we are available? Or how did it hit you in one go, or did you see a staggered?
Because we're regional, we saw a bit of a stagger. You see, we were already getting quite a lot of inquiries from Hong Kong anyway. So this was a double whammy for a country like Hong Kong, because they already had the riots last year. And like everyone else, our 2019 forecast for 2020 was something like a 5 to 6% wage increase, uptake in recruitment. So we're all rosy and positive coming into this year. So we saw a bit of a wave, and and I think we're still in it. We're still getting it. We're probably even we haven't even reached the halfway point of this dark tunnel yet. I think over the next few months there are probably going to be more retrenchments, more companies that's going to get themselves in trouble. I think what's happened, or what's happening, is that all the government subsidies and assistance from Singapore to Australia to Hong Kong to other parts has given it a good cushion. I think the governments have and are doing their best to try and save jobs, and that's the whole purpose of all the subsidies and schemes anyway. But as this drags and as this go along, and I don't think there is a lot of alternatives for companies, because whilst it's nice and it's a good cushion to have 50%, 75% subsidies on wages, if you're getting zero revenue, you're still paying 25%. So it doesn't make sense for businesses. So I think we're still probably going to get more, and it's still a little bit staggered, because I think, yeah, survival is the key. So, you know, everyone is trying to survive at the moment.
Now, Andrew, how can I, let's say, for those who have been furloughed, or even for the young graduates coming out of university right now, it's a pretty tough time to come into the market right now. What skills, what differentiation factor do I need to do now that before there might have been 1 in 10 people, where now there's 1 in 150 people that applied for a job? How can I make myself COVID proof?
It's an interesting one, because it was I've got a daughter that just started uni this year, and it's literally a conversation I just had with her yesterday, to sort of sit back and analyze and even as a young person, have a think about, what do you think? What do you think in 2, 3, 4 years' time, when you graduate, the world may need? Because I think here we are for middle-aged men. We've got experience, but we're probably guessing a little bit as well. But it's that next age of graduates, it's that next age of travelers that's probably going to really come out and innovate and come up with something, right? So I really think with COVID, there's going to be short, medium, and long term. Because going back to just your original, your previous question about consumers and how they may look at hotels and hygiene factors and so forth, and I sort of thought about this, and I think consumers can be simplified in the sense that, look, I think the whole hygiene thing is going to be more of a government thing than a consumer thing. I think if hotels or country gets the tick, I'm not so sure that consumers is going to be looking at, okay, do you have this, do you have that? Because I know after 9/11 and even certain countries that, you could look at Indonesia, with bombings and so forth. I think in a lot of ways we do have short memory. So this thing, from a medium-term point of view, if we never see another pandemic in the next 5, 6, 7 years, is it going to be playing in the minds of, a millennial consumer? I think there is going to be short, medium, and long terms to that. But in terms of skills, I think depending on what areas you go into, I do think that, now is probably a time where you sort of sit back and look at what's going to be needed. And in the short to medium term, I do think that, once COVID is lifted, we're going to go back to semi-normal, because we're not prepared. We're not ready to do anything else. But, I'm sure, Sunit, once the borders are open, you're going to try and fill the rooms if you possibly can. You're going to try and do what you know. But yeah, long term, you start that planning process. But as soon as the borders open, I think everyone is going to try and do what they can, that is allowed by the governments, and try and catch up on what they've lost.
Sunit, from your perspective, you're in the revenue management space, in the commercial space. So you're selling essentially a product and a service to an end consumer, right? What do you think will be the boxes that somebody will go through in order to book, let's say, your hotel over another? Is it going to be hygiene led? Is it going to be you got to show certifications on your website? What do you think will be the prime areas for somebody to say, now I can take this over somebody else?
I think some sort of confidence building with the customer that the hotel is clean and safe will certainly be there. Whether it comes as a certification which is available through different tourism bodies that a particular hotel operates in, like before we had some this unofficial or official star ratings that were awarded to the hotels, right? So food and beverage outlets within Singapore have a cleanliness certification. It's a A plus restaurant, it's a B plus. So all these certificates. So I think that will be the confidence building part that hotels have to. But in a sense, that subconscious education or learning is with the customer today. That is what differentiates certain hotels. Whether it is by star rating, whether it is by the product differentiation, that clean and more hygienic, and what will be the future of that? How do we give customers an assurance that the bed sheets and the pillow covers and the duvets that were provided are clean and sanitized? So yes, I think there's a debate, there's a discussion, there's solutions being discussed on that. So that will certainly be one of the foundation to that. So how do we price the new demand that will be available, and how do we educate the customer that the new price that you are going to pay is something that will be in line? So it is an evolving landscape. I still believe that yes, dropping the price does not get you the extra demand, but pricing for the demand will be something that we will have to look at, because it may not come in the same volume. So if it is a 200-room hotel but can house 250 guests, maybe next time it will be only 220 guests that you can house or are willing to come and stay with you. So it will be a very different proposition in terms of revenue management practices.
Singapore always had a very clean image across the world. Is that going to be do countries or destinations now have to do an extra effort to sell themselves?
I think in the past we have always been, one of the biggest handicap is that people always say that we are too clean and it becomes boring and sterile. However, I think that label seems to work now. But I think the pace of growth is no longer going to be demand driven, and I think the pace of growth is going to be supply side driven, and the supply side factors will come into play in terms of policy. The biggest risk is really your incumbent population, and for us as a destination, when you open up your borders, you are introducing risk. So until there is a method and exchange, a formalized data exchange between, I'm not just talking about COVID, but if you look at COVID itself, is 14-day buffer prior to your visit good enough? You are asymptomatic until a certain point in time. Most of our travelers spend 3.5 days in Singapore, and that could fall within that 14 days easy. So how do you sense make of it? Because at the end of the day, you do not want to leave the people that are stuck here at the receiving end of that. And I think this is something that no policymaker will go ahead. Our industry, tourism's contribution to Singapore's economy is slightly north of 4%. So you're not going to risk that 4% with the entire your population until, of course, vaccine has been found. But then again, would there be other epidemics coming along? So I think the recovery will be a case where a lot of governments will now have to establish that protocol of exchanging data, people movement. And that is where I think the new norm is going to be. I think the demand is definitely there, but the question is, do we have enough of that infrastructure from a policy, from a government to government perspective to enable that? And we are seeing a few experiments coming out. Of course, Hong Kong is, again, Andrew, you are in a very good position because they benefited from China when China opens up. So I think Hong Kong and Macau will definitely be the first off the bat because Chinese are going to flow in. Australia and New Zealand, they are trying out a travel bubble. It's natural. Most of the travelers in New Zealand are from Australia, and if both sides deem that the risk is relatively low, their governments have been working closely together for the longest time. So that should really be, again, something for us to watch out for. Singapore, while we are small, I think basically we are plugged into ASEAN, and ASEAN is a huge market, 60 over billion people. I think basically the question now is, can we come out very quickly with a set of protocols that give us a certain level of assurance as to who is coming into our borders? How can we be sure? Do we have a robust health record that basically stipulates where this individual has been, and if this individual has been infected, how do we then do contact tracing on our side of the house? Once those protocols are up, I think we should be safer, and in that kind of premise, open our borders a little bit more. Otherwise, while the demand for leisure is definitely there, if you don't have a good way of transmitting that data, that will make things very risky for us, and that is something that I don't think we are prepared to basically risk for.
So what should hotels be doing right now, can do right now, and what should they be looking out for so that they don't miss the start?
Firstly, I think I agree with Andrew. The hygiene and everything will be part of a government certification, and the consumer will eventually kind of forget about it, right? Else, what they can do is, I think, read and stay connected to the data. We are in a world of data. There are a lot of indications that are available, right? Every piece of reservation, if a hotel has to look at different market segments, will have an affiliation to a particular channel. So whenever you start getting pickup, whether it is happening in China, whether it starts happening in Australia, if the data is available within a hotel company, share that to say this is where this trend line is coming from, so that anybody who's still in a catch-up phase, not coming into the demand cycle, learns from it, because it's not a very complex industry. Unfortunately, it's a very simple trend lines, and data can be replicated and used across segments, across different type of portfolios if it comes into destination. So don't try to complex the situation, because it is already beyond understanding with so many other stuff. So keep your eye, pick your data set, discard unwanted data set, and monitor it consistently, and experiment. Do experiment. This is the best time to experiment anything, whether it is forecasting, pricing, opening a segment, not opening a segment, etc. So that's what I would say.
We're still evolving. I think everyone is learning through this process. I think we can make forecasts, we can make predictions, but we're still we're still learning. We're still sort of waiting for indicators. But my final thoughts and forecast is, look, for companies, you've just got to bunker down and survive. I think that the motto now is really sort of survival of the fittest. Making sure that your company is fit to survive through this period, and live to fight another day.
A few things. I think we have a lot of schemes out there to train workers. So basically, for companies that are in Singapore, make use of them, because there are wage credits tied to that. So basically, they get paid. They get to be upskilled. So make full use of those things. Look at basically work design, work redesign, and for companies that have not, and really think through about your entire customer experience. How do you then give that assurance, that contactless, and things that that automation that is able to take away the need for manpower, and upskill your staff to be able to do so. We have a few programs that are coming on board. We call it the Learn, Test, and Build framework. I think those were just announced by my CEO not too long ago. Details can be put on our website really, really soon. The Singapore Tourism Accelerator, our cohort 2 is still going strong. The interest from the industry can be better. So therefore, we are really looking forward to industry in really using up all these resources that we put in place. So yeah, I mean, as what Andrew has said, you hunker down, but even if you are hunkering down, you can basically do a little bit of investment to get yourself up into a better shape. And we are here to assist companies and hotels to do so.